It happened on a warm evening during a backyard barbecue. The grill was going, smoke rising into the air, and everyone sat around with beers in their hands, laughing and talking. I was standing close by when my sister-in-law, Kelly, leaned back in her chair and said with a grin, "If you vanished, no one would even notice." The words hung in the air for a second before the group burst out laughing. What crushed me most wasn't her insult. It was Amanda's reaction. My wife threw her head back and laughed right along with them. She didn't say, "That's not true." She didn't try to stop it. She just laughed like the joke was harmless. I forced myself to smile so I wouldn't look out of place, but inside I felt something break. It was like a small crack spreading across glass, quiet but impossible to ignore. I kept flipping burgers and handing out plates, but the sound of their laughter echoed in my head over and over. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I've always been the kind of man who does what needs to be done without expecting praise. I go to work every day, pay the bills, keep food on the table, and fix things when they break. I thought that being steady and reliable mattered. I believed that's what made me a good husband. But standing there at that barbecue, hearing my own wife laugh at the idea that I could disappear without anyone caring, I realized something. In her eyes and in her sister's eyes, I wasn't a partner or a man worth defending. I was just the background noise in her life. The dependable one who kept things moving, but who didn't matter enough to protect from a cruel joke. That single moment hit harder than anything I had faced in our marriage. It showed me a truth I had been avoiding for years. Somewhere along the way I had stopped being seen. I wasn't loved for who I was anymore. I had become invisible in my own home. At home my days all looked the same. I left early in the morning and came back late, tired but still ready to handle what needed to be done. I made dinner, cleaned up afterward, and made sure the bills were paid on time. When the lawn grew too long, I cut it. When something in the house broke, I repaired it. None of these things ever seemed to matter to Amanda. She would eat the meal, leave her plate on the table, and walk away without a word. If I mentioned how much I worked or how tired I was, she brushed it off like it wasn't important. Whenever we spent time with her sister, I knew what was coming. Kelly always had a comment waiting for me. She teased the way I spoke, the way I dressed, even the way I liked to keep things simple. Her jokes came out sharp and they always drew laughs. What hurt more than the words was the way Amanda reacted. She either went along with it or said nothing at all, as if defending me never crossed her mind. I sat there each time listening, feeling smaller with every remark. I couldn't help but think back to when things were different. In the beginning, Amanda had been the person I wanted to share everything with. We talked late into the night, laughed about small things, and leaned on each other. Back then she was my best friend. Now it felt like she had shifted her loyalty somewhere else. Most of her energy went into long conversations with Kelly, endless gossip, or planning shopping trips. Whatever was happening between us was pushed to the side, almost like I wasn't part of her life anymore. One evening, after another long day, I sat in the living room while she scrolled on her phone, giggling at messages from her sister. I realized then how far we had drifted. It wasn't one fight or one bad week. It was years of being overlooked, years of being treated like I was just there to keep the house running. I had been giving everything I had, and in return I had been fading into the background. The truth settled heavy on me. I had been taken for granted for far too long. It was a quiet night at home, long after the guests from the barbecue had gone and the laughter from that evening should have faded. I had gone upstairs, thinking Amanda was getting ready for bed, but I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen. I paused halfway down the hall, catching the sound of her and Kelly talking over wine. Their laughter carried easily through the house, light at first, then sharper when the words became clear. Kelly spoke first, her tone dripping with amusement. "You know, you could do so much better. He's just boring." The word froze me in place. I waited for Amanda to push back, to say something, anything, that would soften the sting. I wanted her to tell her sister she was wrong, that I was more than that. Instead, I heard Amanda giggle, a sound that cut deeper than silence. "Yeah," she said, "but at least he's useful." That was the moment the floor seemed to drop beneath me. Useful. Not loved. Not respected. Just a tool, something that could be picked up when needed and tossed aside when it wasn't. I stood in the hallway, my chest tight, gripping the banister like I needed it to hold me up. I didn't go into the kitchen. I didn't confront them. I turned away, walked into the bedroom, and lay down, staring into the dark. My mind spun, replaying those words over and over until they etched themselves into me. For years I had given everything I could, believing that what I offered mattered. Now I understood how little value they placed on me. Lying there, I realized there was nothing left to salvage. If Amanda and Kelly truly saw me as boring and only useful, then maybe I needed to show them what life looked like without me in it. Not in a dramatic outburst, not in anger, but in silence. A choice made carefully, step by step. That night I made my decision. I would walk away not with a fight but with calm precision. If they believed my absence wouldn't matter, I would let them find out for themselves. And when I was gone there would be no note, no warning, just the empty space where I had once been. After that night something inside me shut down. I didn't announce it or make a scene. I simply started pulling back piece by piece. I stopped folding laundry after work, stopped setting dinner on the table, stopped jumping in every time something broke around the house. When the sink dripped, I let it drip. When the trash overflowed, I left it where it stood. I no longer tried to spark conversations in the evenings or ask how her day had been. I became quiet, almost like a shadow moving through the rooms. At first, Amanda didn't even notice. She was too busy talking on the phone with Kelly, planning her next shopping trip, or scrolling endlessly. If she did notice the changes, she didn't mention them. My silence blended into the background just like I always had. It confirmed what I already knew. My presence had become something she barely registered. Over the next few weeks I started preparing. Slowly, carefully, I shifted money into a separate account, one she didn't know about. I gathered a few essentials, clothes, important papers, the tools I couldn't replace, and stored them in my car. I made sure to do it in a way that looked ordinary, nothing that would raise suspicion. Then came the day I was ready. Amanda left for work like usual, not noticing the suitcase I had hidden in the trunk. Once the door shut behind her, I took one last walk through the house. The rooms felt cold and empty, not because of the walls, but because of what had grown between us. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. There was nothing left to explain. I drove for hours until the familiar roads gave way to quiet highways. 2 towns over, I found a small cabin tucked near the woods, rented under a name that wasn't mine. The landlord didn't ask many questions and I didn't offer any answers. For the first time in years, I sat in a place where When I left, I knew Amanda wouldn't notice right away. For years she had lived like I was just part of the furniture, always there, always dependable. So when I didn't come home that first night, she probably thought I needed space. She didn't reach out, not even a text. By the second day, I still hadn't heard from her, and I imagined she was telling herself I'd cool off and walk back through the door. But days kept passing. The house I had carried on my back began to show signs of neglect. Mail piled up on the counter, bills sat unopened, and deadlines slipped by without anyone keeping track. The yard, which I had always kept neat, grew wild. The little repairs I used to handle, tightening a hinge, unclogging a drain, started adding up until the place must have felt like it was falling apart. When her car broke down, she didn't have me to look at the engine or call in a favor at the shop. She was stranded, and for the first time she had to feel what it was like without me there to fix everything. So I stayed silent. My phone buzzed only after nearly a week, her number flashing across the screen. I let it ring. I let every call ring. There was nothing I wanted to hear. I pictured her pacing the living room, phone in hand, trying to convince herself this was temporary. Eventually, panic must have crept in. She reached out to Kelly, her voice breaking, saying she didn't know where I had gone. But Kelly, true to form, brushed it off. "He's probably just being dramatic," she told her, like my absence was some stunt, some game to get attention. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't a tantrum or a threat. I hadn't left to scare them or to test their patience. I had stepped out of that life completely, and the silence they were sitting in was only the beginning of what it meant to lose me. Every problem that grew, every chore left undone, every bill left unpaid, that was the life they said wouldn't change without me. Now they were finding out how wrong they were. Without me there, Amanda's world began to tilt in ways she hadn't expected. At first, she tried to carry on as if nothing had changed, but the weight of everything I used to balance quickly landed on her shoulders. She was never the one to sit down with the checkbook or track what needed to be paid, and now every due date stared her in the face. Late notices started arriving, fees stacking on top of bills she didn't have the money to cover. The mortgage, the utilities, the endless little costs that keep a house running, all of it began to choke her. Groceries became harder to afford, and the comfort she was used to started slipping away piece by piece. She had always assumed things would just get handled, but now she had no one stepping in to steady the ship. Worse than the money troubles was the silence. I had been the one who steadied her when she was upset, who made sure the rough days didn't swallow her whole. Now there was no voice telling her it would be okay. At night, the house must have felt unbearably empty, the loneliness pressing down until it was hard to ignore the hole I had left. When she turned to Kelly hoping for support, she found only distance. Kelly had always been quick with her jokes at my expense, but when Amanda truly needed her, she pulled back. To Kelly it was all too messy, too much work. She had her own life and didn't want to be dragged into Amanda's unraveling. The one person Amanda leaned on after me was suddenly unavailable, leaving her even more isolated. Slowly, it must have dawned on her just how much of her stability had been tied to me. Every system, every comfort, every bit of security she'd enjoyed was something I had put in place. Without me there to cushion her, she began to feel the sharp edges of life she had been shielded from for so long. For the first time, she was forced to see that the man she and her sister dismissed as boring had been the very foundation of the life she took for granted. Life in the cabin was the opposite of everything I had left behind. The place was small, tucked against a line of trees with a creek running close by, but it felt more like home than the house I had poured years into. My days settled into a rhythm that was simple but satisfying. I woke with the sun, made coffee, and cooked breakfast in a quiet kitchen where no one rolled their eyes or dismissed me. Afterward, I'd step outside, breathe in the crisp air, and feel something I hadn't felt in years: peace. I learned to live on less, and it suited me. I fished in the mornings, sometimes keeping enough to fry for dinner, other times just casting a line for the calm it gave me. I picked up a modest job in town, the kind that didn't demand late nights or endless stress. It paid enough to cover what I needed, and that was enough. My evenings were mine alone. I read, worked on small projects, or simply sat on the porch watching the sky change color. The silence that once would have felt heavy became my comfort. There was no voice cutting me down, no one treating me like a background character. Every choice I made was my own. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't being measured against anyone's expectations. I was just living, and it was enough. Of course, thoughts of Amanda still came. In the beginning, they hit hard, like echoes I couldn't shut off. I wondered what she was doing, whether she missed me or just complained about me being gone. But as the days passed, the sting dulled. I thought of her less with anger and more with clarity. I realized that leaving hadn't been about punishing her, though part of me knew the silence I left behind would teach her more than words ever could. This wasn't revenge, it was release. I wasn't hiding out, plotting to prove her wrong. I was finally breathing in a life where I wasn't invisible. Still, I couldn't help but imagine her sitting in that house, trying to juggle everything I had carried for so long. I knew she was learning the lesson I had left for her. Not through yelling, not through arguments, but through absence. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the last light fade from the sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: free. It was late in the evening, the kind of night when the woods outside grew so still you could hear the smallest rustle. I was sitting at the cabin table with a book open when I heard tires crunching on gravel. My chest tightened instantly. Almost no one ever came out this way, and I hadn't given this address to anyone in town except the landlord. When I looked out the window, the sight stopped me cold. Amanda's car pulling in, crooked headlights cutting across the trees. She got out fast, slamming the door, her hair a mess and her eyes wild. Before I could even step onto the porch, her voice tore through the night. "How could you just leave me like that?" she screamed, her face red and trembling. She didn't even pause to catch her breath, just launched into rage like the silence I had left her with was the deepest betrayal she had ever known. I stood there, calm, watching her words crash against me like waves I no longer had to drown in. When she finally stopped long enough to breathe, I asked evenly, "Do you even remember the joke? If I vanished, no one would care." "You laughed. So I tested it." The fight drained out of her in an instant. Her knees seemed to weaken as she pressed her hands to her face. Then the sobs came, loud and heavy, echoing into the still night air. She stumbled closer, begging between tears. "I didn't think you'd actually go. I never thought you'd do this." I let her cry, watching the woman I had once built my life around unravel on the porch I now called mine. She reached for me, words spilling out. "Apologies, excuses, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I swear I didn't. Please just come home." We can fix this. But her apologies felt thin like paper that dissolved the second you touched it. She wasn't sorry for how she had treated me for years, only for the fact that I had finally walked away. Every word she spoke rang hollow, like she was grasping at me not out of love, but out of fear of being alone. Standing there, I realized nothing she said could undo what had already been broken. The life we had built together had ended the moment she laughed at that cruel joke. And now she was facing the truth of what it meant. Amanda stood on the porch with tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking as she begged me to come back with her. We can fix this, Daniel. I promise things will be different. I'll do better, I'll listen this time. Please just come home. Her words came fast, desperate, like she was trying to build a bridge out of nothing but empty air. I shook my head slowly. No. I'm not coming back to be your handyman, your safety net, or your punchline. I'm done being invisible. My tone wasn't harsh. It was steady, final. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't about punishing her. It was about saving myself. Her face twisted with anger, her tears mixing with rage. You're being cruel. You've abandoned me. Who does this to their wife? She spat the words like I was the one who had betrayed vows, as if walking away after years of being ignored made me heartless. I met her glare without flinching. Cruel? Amanda, you laughed while your sister told you I didn't matter. Do you remember how many times she cut me down and you said nothing? How often you chose her over me? I was standing right next to you and you acted like I wasn't even there. My voice rose slightly, not out of anger but from the weight of years that had been building inside me. She tried to argue, but the fight left her eyes as the truth pressed in. She knew I wasn't making things up. She had chosen her sister's approval over my dignity more times than she could count. The memories hit her as hard as my words did. Every insult she let slide, every time she looked away while I was mocked. Her shoulders sagged, her lips trembling as if she wanted to keep defending herself but had nothing left to stand on. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of her sobs. I didn't reach for her. I didn't soften my stance. I needed her to see it clearly. This wasn't a fight we could patch up with promises. The years of neglect, of being overlooked, had ended what we had built together. And for the first time Amanda seemed to understand. She hadn't lost me in one moment. She had chipped away at me until there was nothing left to hold on to. On that porch, under the weight of my words, she finally realized the truth. She had destroyed her own marriage by taking me for granted. I never went back with her. The very next week I filed for divorce and kept my distance. There were no arguments, no long explanations. I simply ended it. Amanda was left to manage everything on her own, and it didn't take long before the weight crushed her. The bills stacked higher than she could handle, the mortgage slipped out of reach, and before long the house was gone. She tried leaning on Kelly, but that didn't last. Kelly, who once had so much to say about me, wanted nothing to do with Amanda's troubles. The calls slowed, the visits stopped, and eventually her own sister left her standing alone. While her life unraveled, mine settled into something steady. In the quiet of that cabin I rebuilt. I worked, I kept to myself, and slowly I began to meet people who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I didn't need grand gestures or endless praise. Just simple respect, something I had been starved of for years. Looking back, I realized I hadn't needed to raise my voice or strike back with cruelty. Sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't about shouting or betrayal. It's silence. It's walking away. It's proving that when you vanish, the ones who mocked you are the very ones who fall apart. What would you have done in my place? Walk away for good or try one more time? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and follow for more.